Hi there and welcome to the discipline of discipleship. This week in the 247 community, some of the things we've been looking at is to do around worship. And worship is a very interesting topic. I think it's very difficult to see it sometimes as a discipline of a disciple. It's an honour and a privilege to glorify God. Did you know in the Westminster Catechism, something that they all agreed on as a statement of belief, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. So we have to worship and we have to be able to glorify God in everything that we do. Sometimes I do wonder though whether we really understand what it is that worship is about. If you would ask many Christians, and I'm making an assumption here, when you say the word worship, they'll start to think about a genre of music. Worship is about music. It's about having a band that can lead us in a few songs and be able to lead us into a feeling or an experience where we get to encounter God. I was thinking about this topic this week and about how that relates to a discipline. Are we commanded to sing? Well, yes, we are. Paul tells us a couple of times in Ephesians, I think it is, and Colossians, to sing psalms, hymns and spiritual songs. So that is telling us that we should continue to do that as believers. But I want to think about worship as a definition that I used to hear from Roger Jones, who used to use it and said it's something that you attribute worth to, your worthship. Even in services that I've seen and in this season when we've been so restricted and locked down, it gives us a chance to think about the object of our worship. Sadly, for a lot of people, the object of their worship is themselves. And they choose to have that experience and that encounter so they can have a happy feeling. But I don't think worship is really about that. Of course, as we draw near to God, He draws near to us. But we should attribute worth to Jesus no matter what our circumstances and no matter how we feel when we get up on a Sunday morning. I used to joke, mainly because in my background, I travelled to a lot of churches and had to prepare services and pick songs for a congregation that I didn't really know. And so it was very difficult to try and pick worship songs to facilitate that time, that service, that worship with Jesus. I wanted people to be able to encounter Him, but I didn't know the songs. But God just corrected me at one particular point, because wherever we were able to go, and many different denominations, I knew who the object of my worship was. And so whilst I didn't know the tunes, as soon as I could encounter and see the words, as soon as I can see the words, I knew that they were pointing and talking about the Jesus that I loved. Of course I could worship. I didn't need the tunes. I needed the one who it was that I wanted to lift high and glorify. Worship is a devotion as well, something that we give ourselves to. We need to know who the object of our worship is, but then when we do, we need to devote ourselves to doing that. When you devote yourself to something, you give it your full attention, your time, you give your everything. Surely that's what devotion is. When you're devoted to something, you are almost obsessed, not thinking about anything else at all. Is your worship of Jesus something that you devote yourself to? Actually, forget is your worship of. Is Jesus someone you devote yourself to? Does your every action and every choice come dedicated, devoted to Jesus? The command says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul and strength. that means everything. What else? What else have you got space for? He used to joke with me about how could you do that when you loved Laura. And we used to joke a lot about that we are each other's number two because God is our number one. Jesus is the one we devote ourselves to, and whilst we struggle sometimes to do that, we know that He is our priority, the one we devote to. And that means that if Laura is called to one place and I'm called to another one, our devotion means that because God says it, we go, whether we go together or whether we go apart. We give Him our full attention and we attribute worth to Him. None of that depends on how I feel. It doesn't matter whether I get up well, whether I've slept well, if I've had a wonderful week or if I've had a terrible week. I often walk in asking myself the question, is Jesus still on the throne? Of course He is. So therefore, do I need to worship Him, to attribute worth to Him? Of course He does. He is the one that we want to worship, irrespective of how I feel. My faith is not dependent upon my feelings, and my worship is not dependent upon how I feel. My worship is dependent upon the one who I choose to attribute worth to. And that is, of course, Jesus. In this 247 community, we began by looking at what it says in Acts chapter 2, verses 42 to 47. And even in there, it talks of the disciples devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, being people of devotion. The discipline comes in a disciple is when people can see that you are actually devoted to Jesus. It means whatever it takes to serve Him, to follow Him and to obey His commands, you will do. Because He is worth it. Worthy of our worship. Of course we sing songs about Him. We enjoy singing songs about Him. But we want to devote ourselves to choosing to follow Him. That's worship. And the reason it's a discipline is because you have to look beyond your feelings, ignore the will of the flesh, forget your headaches, forget your terrible weeks, your financial situations, the awful things that you may be going through, and turn your eyes upon Him. Because when we fix our eyes upon Him, the author and perfecter of our faith, we're enabled to run the race. Everything that hinders us, that entangles us, we can cast off and choose to focus upon Him. I think this is a really interesting topic because I don't see it. And I want to see it. I want to see it in churches, and I hope that throughout this period that the people that come back after this lockdown will be ones that everybody can see as devoted to Jesus. I have to pray for that. Because for a long time I've prayed for it. And I don't know if I see it. I want to see it. I want to see a body of people that are devoted to their Saviour, that give Him worth, that does whatever it takes to serve Him. I hope that when I do choose to spend and be spent for the sake of the gospel, I am attributing worth to the one that I am devoted for, Jesus. So the discipline is to worship and devote yourself to Him. Honestly, ask yourself that question. Does everything you do attribute worth to Jesus? Do you devote yourself to glorifying Him? Not easy questions to answer, because you have to do a lot of searching. But he is truly worthy of our worship, our attention, our devotion. And that is the discipline of a disciple.